Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television. A reminder of our top stories. Yobe State Governor Ibrahim Gaidam blames withdrawal of troops from roadblocks around Dapchi and other towns for Monday's attack and abduction of students from Government Girls Science and Technical College. Parents of abducted Dapchi girls say that 105 of the students are missing, form association to demand the release of their children. Troops of Operation Lafia Dole arrest top Boko Haram commander as they clear more of the terrorist hideouts in Sambisa forest. And death toll from the twin car bomb blast in Somalia's capital Mogadishu rises to over 40. For more on our top stories and others, please visit our website is channelstv.com and on youtube.com/channelsweb, where you can find our videos. Log on to m.channelstv.com to watch us on your mobile device, or download the Channels TV app for Android, iOS and Windows devices from their respective stores. The Channels TV and Channels 24 app will give you access to news and updates. You'll also have access to the Eyewitness feature, which you can use to share those pictures, videos or news of happenings around you. Just install the app, then tap and swipe to reveal the menu and follow the instructions. And to some pictures you sent to our Eyewitness portal. And we begin with this one from the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, showing the aftermath of the gas explosion that occurred in Zuba area. Our Eyewitness reporter who sent this in says the incident claimed lives and injured many, unfortunately so. Next image is from Ikorodu area of Lagos State, showing the demolition which occurred in Lagoon View Estate, Ibeshi. Our Eyewitness reporter claims that the act was done by an individual who is neither a government official nor working with any constituted authority, but just wants to grab their land for himself. And still on demolition is this picture from Onibombo local government area of Lagos State, showing what our Eyewitness reporter calls an illegal demolition. He says the incident happened from Adeniji Street to Backinson Street in Oregon. And we end this with this picture of a refuse heap along Lagos Ibadan. That would be Lagos Island in Lagos State. Our Eyewitness reporter wants the new cleaning agency to do more in keeping the environment clean. We do sincerely thank you for sending in those pictures, as we ask that you keep them coming. The recent ranking of Nigeria in the Corruption Index by Transparency International has again brought to the fore the need for good corporate governance in public and private sectors in the country. Nigeria ranked 148 out of 180 countries assessed in 2017 on the perception of corruption, published on Wednesday. It shows that out of 100 points, signaling maximum transparency and no corruption, Nigeria scored 27 points. A report the federal government says is not factual and therefore unacceptable. The next report looks at the role of corporate governance mechanism in the fight against corruption and economic growth.
As the saying goes, what gets measured gets managed, and adequate disclosures ensure good governance. That's the reason for this gathering of the members of the corporate world who have excelled in the recently concluded corporate governance rating system put in place by the Nigerian Stock Exchange and the Convention of Business Integrity in Lagos.
We all know that sound corporate governance practices in the nation will lead to higher performance in its economy, provide more sources for capital investment, and increase the credibility of shareholders.
Corporate governance issues, no doubt, not only impact the corporate sector, but are a necessary condition for the long-term sustainability of the development of an economy. The role of corporate governance mechanisms in economic growth remained virtually invisible until the East Asian financial crisis in 1997 to 1998. The global financial crisis of 2008, which witnessed the collapse of many financial institutions, corporations and global economies, brought with it a substantive challenge to policymakers and called for development and enforcement of effective corporate governance mechanisms.
Companies are encouraged to go through the process. Directors need to go through the process. And indeed, even companies that have gone through the process, after every 3 years, they need to recertify so that we make sure that compliance is ongoing. That is why I said it's a marathon. For directors that haven't taken the exam yet and that haven't gone through the process, because it is a required component for their companies to pass, I'm sure they will do the right thing since they're actually fiduciaries for their companies. So they must do the things that are in the best interest of the companies that they represent.
While encouraging private corporate organizations to volunteer and submit themselves for evaluation on the Corporate Governance Rating Index, the need to also involve public sector organizations is also imperative. The Corporate Governance Index is said to be a veritable tool for investors in their investment decision-making process. 2.06. And as the federal government continues to fight corruption and attract more foreign direct investment, the question is, how can they leverage on the corporate governance rating system to rid the country of corruption going forward? Chimeze Obi Wago, Channels Television News.
Let's get some more perspective on this subject. And I'm now being joined live from our Abuja studios by the Chief Executive Officer of the Convention for Business Integrity, Mr. Soji Apampa. I want to thank you so much indeed for joining us on the News at 10. Now, the federal government has dismissed the Transparency International CPI report, saying that it is not based on facts and that the concrete achievements of Buhari's administration are not even factored in that. What's your own assessment of that report?
Well, it is true that the perceptions index is based on exactly what it says, perceptions, and that it is a survey of surveys. It's an index of various indices, but traditionally it has been used as a barometer. So although it might not it might tell you that there's something stinking, something rotten about a certain country. It does not have the capacity to tell you exactly what and exactly where you need to look to deal with the matter. But it is a well-accepted indicator for the level of rot within a country. And certainly many international investors, when they're doing their country risk assessments, will start from Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index. So even though it might not be based on fact and it's based on perceptions, it is still used as a placeholder for what is happening in reality.
Now, much of the time, as in the TICPI report that we saw, the issue of corruption is most times associated with the public sector. Does it then mean that businesses and private sectors have no culpable impact on this?
No, it doesn't mean that at all. And I think that is a big gap in the way that corruption, the issue of dealing with corruption, has been approached in Nigeria, for instance. Or if I can say, how it has been approached by the civil society in general. People tend to talk about corruption in society, corruption in government, but forgetting the enabler that is business, or the enabler that is professional services. You'll find that most corrupt acts require lawyers, accountants, real estate agents, and various other professionals in order to be successful, in quotes, in those kinds of activities. So leaving them out is a big error. And not having an answer for those who are partners in the equation of corruption. For instance, you find that public procurement is very often used as a conduit for illicit funds and for stealing public funds. And you find that the sensation in the media is about the public actors who are involved, forgetting that there were private companies who were also involved in the transaction. But it's not only private to public, even public sector to public sector. Many professional services firms are unable to get the briefs and the business they're looking for, even from the private sector, without engaging in kickbacks. So you'll find that bribery and corruption is not limited to the public sector. There is a lot going on in the private sector as well.
Precisely, because you have championed the cause for clean business, as you will. How tough has it been, though, for you and your organization in this instance in trying to ensure good corporate governance becomes the order of the day?
We've been on this journey since 1997. So this is 21 years, and it shows you that this has been a long, hard-fought battle. But thankfully, every year since the return to democracy in 1999 has made it easier to speak about the issues of corruption and indeed to pursue some of the innovations around dealing with corruption. The current corporate governance rating system, the efforts on that project have begun since the year 2010, inspired, as you had in your report, by the near collapse of the Nigerian stock market in 2008-2009, and the problems being traced to a lack of integrity, poor corporate governance, poor regulatory environment, and so on, which then spurred us to see this as an opportunity to get business to take responsibility for what it can do on its own to try to improve the governance record of the private sector in the country.
Because I'm really wondering how the government should approach this and trying to ensure that the next TICPI report is much better and favors Nigeria, which has been recording consistent downfalls or pitholes right from 2015. What would you say in that regard?
The first thing I would say is that there is a national strategy to combat corruption, which is built on 5 pillars. The first pillar is on enforcement and sanctions. The second is on repatriating or fighting for the proceeds of corruption that have left the country. The third pillar is around an ethical revolution, around prevention, and around public engagement. But you'll find that there has been an overemphasis on enforcement and sanctions and on trying to get these monies back, but not enough effort has been placed on preventive measures. It's akin to having a broken faucet with water leaking everywhere, and then you're running after those who are fetching the water without fixing the faucet. By the time you run around for 4 years trying to catch those who have fetched some water illegally, then you will have another set to run after for the next 4 years. And it doesn't make any sense at all, except you block the leakages. And to do that, you have to take on preventive measures. To put in preventive measures, you must be prepared to do corruption risk analyses. It must be the bread and butter of our anti-corruption agencies, of civil society, of anyone who wants to deal with corruption. And based on where they find the corruption risks, then they should also come up with integrity plans. What needs to be done to curb corruption that is occurring in that particular way? And that way, you keep closing each of the leaking faucets, you keep fixing them. If we'd been doing that since 1999, we would have had several years. Now, even more than a decade of improvements to the system, rather than the continuous running after, only running after those who are perceived to have drawn waters from the well illegally.
We must thank you so much indeed for talking to us. The executive, my apologies, I'm afraid that's the much we can take. The Chief Executive Officer of the Convention for Business Integrity, Mr. Soji Apampa. I want to thank you so much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us. When the News at 10 returns, the Department of Petroleum Resources continues its campaign to make products available to Nigerians. Join us again.